Welcome to Watkins Glen. The purpose of this morning's press conference, obviously, is to recognize and welcome Jim Riesbeck into the Legends of the Glen group. And he was the man, of course, who took over the track back in 1983 and brought NASCAR back to the Glen in 1986. We have some distinguished people with us this morning to help in this ceremony or this press conference, and I will introduce them to you very briefly now, and then we'll get back to them with a little more introduction. But, of course, the president of Watkins Glen is with us, Michael Printup. We have Jim's brother, John, is with us here today. And the president of NASCAR, Mike Helton, is with us. Some members of Jim Riesbeck's family also with us today. We have Larry Riesbeck, a brother. We have Ben Vetter, who is a brother-in-law. They're seated over here to the right. Jeff Riesbeck, a grandson, is also with us today. John's wife, Julie Riesbeck, is also here. And Jim's sister, Mary Linda Vetter, is with us. So with that said, I'd like to bring into the conversation here the president of Watkins Glen International, Michael Printup. Michael?
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning for such a great event we have to honor Mr. Jim Riesbeck into the Legends of the Glen. If it wasn't for Jim and his visionary and his persistent leadership skills in driving ISC and NASCAR to come up here back in the early 80s, I don't think Watkins Glen would be what it is today. So it is a great honor that we had such a historic person leading this charge. Jim, as you well know, was just the driving force in this effort, and he was very continued these conversations with the France family to bring up NASCAR up here in the early 80s. The driving force behind the entire event. Jim was a champion and will always be remembered as a champion as he passed away in 1993. Today, as Jim mentioned, we have John Riesbeck here to accept the honor of being inducted into the Legends of the Glen. Mr. Helton?
Yeah, I'm very thankful to be a part of this today because I knew Jim personally. And just very quickly, Jim was an officer at Corning Glass here in Corning, New York. But more importantly, he was a NASCAR fan and was a ticket holder in Daytona for a long time. And after one of the Daytona 500s, and after having already established a relationship in the sport through the Chameleon sponsorship, some of you will remember Dick Brooks and Junie Donlevy carrying Chameleon sunglasses. Well, that was a Corning product. And that was Jim's entree into being involved in a relationship in the sport. He shows up on Monday morning in the offices trying to get a meeting with Jim Foster, who some of you remember. And Jim was of the nature to take meetings whenever possible, but never knew what the outcome was going to be. Well, this meeting created quite an outcome, and Jim Riesbeck convinced Jim Foster that there was some merit in continuing the conversation, and convinced ultimately Bill France and Jim France into looking at restoring Watkins Glen. Now, Jim Riesbeck had twofold of an effort or an agenda. One was because he really loved racing and NASCAR, fortunately. But also civically minded was to have a facility that Corning Glass and this area could take pride in. And I think that drove it as much as anything did. And so we're sitting here today as a result of Jim Riesbeck's efforts, and that's why I feel like Hall of Fames and museums and these types of elements are very critical for us, because it helps tell the story, remind some of us that are older, but tell the story to the folks who never had the opportunity to know someone like Jim Riesbeck, the importance, because I guarantee you, without a doubt, that had it not been for Jim Riesbeck, we would not be here today. And I don't know what shape the Glen would have been in, because it took quite a bit to revive it and restore it and to keep the tradition, or actually bring the tradition back to Watkins Glen. But there's no question in my mind, had it not been for Jim, NASCAR would not be here today. And I don't know, I can't speak for what the situation at the track would be. So for that, I'm very grateful. The personal side of Jim Riesbeck, he loved racing. He loved Corning. He loved his job and the people around it. He also liked motorcycles, which didn't hurt in this group anyway, and was one of the originators of North Meets South, which was a lot of industry folks from NASCAR. At that time, it was R.J. Reynolds, drivers, teams, operators that would get together with folks from this area. He would involve Corning folks, the Harley dealer here in Corning and Elmira, and they'd get together at around the fall race in Bristol, around the August race in Bristol, and then they would get together for a ride and end up at the night race in August in Bristol. And so he was very civic, social, and business minded, but he was just a great personality, and it was very unfortunate that we lost him so early. Because I don't know what might have been able to come from his energy level as if he were still around today. So I wanted to thank you guys for including me today, because Jim was personally a friend, but professionally a guy from behind the scenes. And if you don't know the name Jim Riesbeck, that's very unfortunate. So this opportunity to put Jim's name and his efforts out front, I think, is very important to all of us.
Thank you, Mike. If you would, John, would you share some personal recollections of Jim with us and his association to the Glen and NASCAR?
I'd be glad to. Jim loved speed. It didn't matter if it was a car or a motorcycle, and he loved racing of all forms. And I can recall how proud he was when he was able to get Corning to make the commitment to buy into the Glen here and resurrect it and get NASCAR up here. He told me NASCAR had never been in further north than Pocono, and it meant a lot to get it up here and get racing back into this community. He had big responsibilities at Corning. He was in charge of human resources and tourism in the area, and it meant a lot to bring that back here to him. And the fact that he not only had the vision, but he had the drive and the ability to get it done. And he was a great guy, and he'd be very proud of this time. He'd be especially proud to think that this is still going 15 years after his death. It's still going strong. And the only business card he ever gave me, he had all those responsibilities at Corning, was the one that said he was chairman and chief executive of the Corning Watkins Glen International. That meant more to him, I think, than all the rest of the titles that he had during his short but very active career. And we thank you on behalf of Jim and the family. Thank you for this recognition.
Well, we certainly appreciate John, you being here along with the members of the family this morning. And we're going to have a photo op with the trophy or the ceremony here just as soon as we're through. We have time for like 2 questions, and then we're going to ask if you have any further questions of anyone. We move them off to the side because we have another program we need to get underway here. So if we have a couple of questions, somebody want to raise their hand now, and hold your comments or your questions to why we're here today, the induction. Yes, sir. There's a microphone right there.
I'm Mike Embry, NASCAR scene. Mike, I want to ask you that NASCAR clearly has made the commitment to keeping road courses at the Cup level, and there's been a lot of conversation about, to make the championship and the chase truly a championship, that there should be a road course in the chase. Have you guys considered that at all?
Yeah, and I think we've answered this in the past, that the chase wasn't about changing the schedule, and it still is not, and because that gets really complicated trying to move types of tracks around in the closing of the season. So it kind of is what it is, and I think Watkins Glen, going back to the focus on Jim and Watkins Glen, has made a strong commitment to keeping up with times, and it works, it really works this time of year here. But because I've been here in the wintertime, and it's not very pretty. It's very beautiful this time of year. But I'll remind everybody, the chase wasn't about changing the schedule. The chase was creating a way to determine the championship. So we're still of the mindset not to adjust the schedule to accommodate the chase. The chase accommodates the schedule.
All right, time for one more question, then we'll have our photo op and then move the questions off to the side. Anyone else have a question? No? Then we'll have our photo op with the trophy here, and